Hey Shadow, hopefully this will give you some more detailed answers. To add to what Struggle has already mentioned, and I'm just echoing sort of what he has said, he and I are both in agreement that base clamps make a big difference, at least to us. So there's many posts out there where he and I have both chimed in about having really nice base clamps is kind of a nice, important thing for us. So these are the base clamps that Struggle was talking about that come on the 6004. This is a 6004, but they also put them on some of their higher end electronic machines, or used to. So what they call these are, they call this the quick action cam lock base clamps. The normal black ones like you have are called quick action, at least that's their terminology. Quick action, which you just push it until you feel enough resistance. And these have what you're looking for, which is basically a positive lock. Also, they're a little easier. So I describe it a little bit like a compound bow. This is spring loaded and you have to push this, and if you don't push it far enough, it'll just return to its home position. And eventually, if you push it past about a little past halfway, it has a positive lock. And so now the base clamp is fully locked, and to release it you just have to push this lever past this point here and that spring will take over. I don't usually like to let it fly, but basically like that. So that's what they call quick action, switch action cam lock. So that's switch action cam lock, and the black ones like you have are referred to as quick action by Gamma. Now I don't know if they still have these. Years ago you could buy these for $300 a piece, so they were extremely expensive compared to what most parts would cost, or even other base clamps. I'm with Struggle in that I would be very curious to check out those X-Spider base clamps. They look really sweet. The question is, will it be compatible with these turntables? The one thing about Gammas, now obviously these are made by Gamma, so they're going to fit on a Gamma turntable, is you'll notice that the turntable on Gammas, they don't actually have a rail, a separate metal piece that drops in here. So it's just a slot. So I don't know how compatible other brands' base clamps work on Gamma turntables. So that's a question mark. But obviously you could purchase these, and actually they have an even fancier version of these. Who knows what these, even if they have these, they're probably more expensive now than they were years ago. It was ridiculous that to get a pair of these it would cost you $600 alone. But they also now have, if you go look at, say, the Gamma 8900 or a Gamma 9900, the two highest end electronics, they come with something even nicer than this. They have, they call it auto release. It's basically like a gravity release, where if you drop the clamp, it'll release. And this is super easy. You just click it, and it has a button on the top. So they're very similar to like Wilson Biardo base clamps, or like a Prince, closer to like a Prince 6000 or a Prince 7000 would have. Basically really, really nice. And I think that they're gravity release. They certainly, you can hit the button here and it automatically unlocks it, and it probably unlocks if you drop the clamp, but I don't know that for certainty. I've never had the pleasure of using them. They look really, really nice. So if you want to see the Gamma's fanciest base clamps, go look at the 8900 or the 9900. I assume that the 6004 still comes with these style, the so-called switch action cam lock. But so before they started putting curved rails, you can see that these rails are straight. So these rails, or slots, are straight, and if you, I don't know if I've got the lighting good, the lighting's probably really bad, but if you can see over there, I want you to look right here at the thickness of the turntable. It's kind of hard to tell there, I don't have the lighting so great. But the turntable, back when they had these straight slots or straight rails, was thicker. So if you take this block out underneath there's two small screws, you remove those and you can remove this, and then you'll be able to take your base clamps off. So just by sliding them to the end, it'll come out. So the bottom of this has a brass block. It looks very much like a Biardo type, and it's got like a sort of a inverted T-shaped brass block, and the gap here, the distance, basically is it's basically determined by the thickness of the turntable. So obviously these work with the old turntable, and this maybe you can see it here now. So that thickness right there is 9 millimeters thick. So these clamps, that's why I was asking if you have straight slots or curved slots. Because you have the curved slots like this, it's not necessarily going to be a straight compatible fit, because again, you've got those little blocks. You can remove that like I've done over here and do the same thing if you take your what do they call this, a quick action base clamp. If you slide that off, these are a little different than they used to be, because these turntables with the curved slots are no longer as thick as they used to be. Let me switch hands. So if you look at the gap here on the underside between this sort of thick washer and the bottom, that's a lot narrower space, and the reason for that is because the thickness right here, this is a much thinner piece now. Hopefully you can see there with my finger. So this, when I measured it, is less than 4 millimeters, like 3.8 or something like that. So it went from being, you know, these base clamps were fitting something that was 9 millimeters thick here, or binding, I should say, gripping, binding a piece of metal that was 9 millimeters in thickness, versus now this very, very thin, less than 4 millimeters. So they changed at least these base clamps to accommodate, to now fit this thinner turntable here. So this gap is narrower. Now perhaps because there is enough threading here, it looks like that if you back this nut off, that this would get wide enough. In other words, I think if you back this nut off and adjusted for it, you could probably fit these onto this turntable, but you cannot put these onto this turntable, because I've tried it, because obviously I prefer these base clamps. It would be really nice to be able to plop this into here on the occasions that I use this turntable, but I can't do that because even with these screws tightened all the way in to make this gap as small as possible, it's still too thick, because it was never intended, when these were made, it was never intended to fit on a turntable that was only 4 millimeters thick or 3.5 millimeters thick. It was intended to fit this turntable, which is 9 millimeters thick. So I suspect if these are still made, and if they come on any machine with curved slots, because to my knowledge the 6004 still comes with the straight slots, but I don't know that for certainty, because Gamma and Tennis Warehouse and Tennis Express, all of those companies are woefully bad about leaving up old pictures of older models instead of the most current ones. It's hard to even find photos of any of their models displaying the curved rails or curved slots. I found one over on Tennis Express that had the picture for the XELS was showing this turntable, but even on Gamma's website and all the Tennis Warehouse photos, even for models that you know now come with curved rails, are still displaying the straight ones. So it's, and sometimes older clamps, string clamps themselves. So it's hard to really tell what you're getting. So I don't know. If a 6004 now comes with curved slots. It probably still comes with these, but perhaps this brass block has would be shallower, so to speak. In other words, this portion here probably doesn't come down as far, so that this T sits closer up to the bottom of the base clamp. At any rate, so these are the clamps that were being spoken of. And again, so maybe X-Spider clamps would fit these Gamma turntables. It's really hard to know. You can't just drop in the rails because there is no separate metal rail. Well, if you have a really old Gamma, the really old Gamma turntables did actually have the big rectangle metal slot that you can remove with the screws. But once they started making them like this, where it was just incorporated and stamped out, you have to kind of keep that in mind. So 9 millimeters, less than 4 millimeters. As far as if you ever upgrade your clamps, all of the bases, all of the stems or the posts will measure 12 millimeters. So these are 12 millimeters to fit into the base clamp. These are 12 millimeters as well. So I mean, these I can just take out of one machine, move over here if I wanted to. Even the old ones like this, the old blocky ones, that's still 12 millimeters. So a gamma clamp. So any gamma clamp is going to fit in any of these bases. Now if you buy a different brand, as long as this is 12 millimeters, or unless you want to take it to a machinist and get it milled down to make this 12 millimeters, then it would fit in here. But it's, you know, basically I think your question was more about if you were to replace just these, and obviously if you were replacing one gamma base clamp with another gamma base clamp, the string clamps themselves are going to be interchangeable because this is all the same sizing there. So hopefully that sheds a little bit more light and a little bit more detail on the topic for you.